one of the things I talk about a lot because it's important and I'm not sure people fully understand what's going on with it is how the media sets up expectations, how the media determines what people quote unquote know to be true by covering or not covering things, by the way they cover things. And it is the thing that I think people still don't understand. Certainly the media doesn't understand. It's what we're talking about when President Trump talks about fake news. It's not that it's a made-up story. It's more of how it's presented, how it's covered, or how it's ignored. Well, one of the fellows who has done a lot of looking at that is Dan Wos. He joins us right now. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Hey, Tom. Great to be on your show. Sorry I missed you in Chicago.
That's all right. Now, you are the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy 1 and 2 books. Fascinating. And you're basically a student of the media and what they do with this. And you come to this with this background of you were not a gun guy. And when you kind of looked at it and figured it all out, you swung around. I know that a lot of people in the media think that when President Trump talks about fake news, they think he's talking about them making up stories, but that's not really what we're talking about. It's sliding things, shading things, not covering some things, a wink and a nod. I watched one the other day where they were talking about the guy who sent the bombs through the mail, right? And all the B-roll, the video that's rolling while they're doing a straight story, talking about it. This was on CNN. But all of the video they showed were pictures of him at Trump rallies. You know, I mean, they're making a point. They're trying to color the public's perception here. It's not like they're going to report the news and you figure it out. It's we're going to tell you what to think and we're going to make sure that you believe a certain thing. Am I overreacting to this?
No, you're right, and because they're not necessarily coming right out and lying. It's just in the way that they angle the story and the way that they set up the narrative. And I use the examples of the terminology that they use. You know, they use certain terminology to imply certain things about guns and gun owners. They'll use things like, gun violence. That term, gun violence. They'll use assault weapon. They'll use Wild West. And the reason they do this is because these terms have implications and change the way we internally, the way their guns are internally represented in our minds. Like for instance, here's one thing that a lot of the pundits will do, with the anti-gun pundits. They'll say things like, well, what should we do about all this gun violence? And the problem with that question is that the way our brains work is we tend to want to solve the problem. Our brains are like problem-solving devices. We instantly go to try to solve the problem of gun violence. So what we'll do is we'll start debating our position, and we'll start justifying our gun ownership position, and we'll use statistics and things like this. So we'll argue on their playing field. We'll play ball on their field, when what we really should be doing is questioning the question, because what they're doing is they're asking you a question. What should we do about this gun violence? It's the whole preposition of gun violence is not even accurate. There's no such thing as gun violence, but yet we try to answer the question.
Yeah, they're setting it up and saying, okay, the use of guns is a problem. Gun violence, of course, I always throw it out and say, not all violence is bad. And they go, what? So yeah, because if the good guys come in, if the cops come in and shoot the bad guy, that's definitely gun violence. But that's a good thing, right? It's like they go, well, blah, 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 blah. And then of course they completely ignore, and that's one of the things I'd love to get you to touch on. They ignore the whole concept, the very existence of self-defense gun uses in their coverage. It's not that they, and sometimes they'll say, well, that just hardly ever happens, but usually they just ignore it as part of the equation.
Well, that's true. That's definitely true. And what's even more scary to me is the fact that they ignore the fact of human violence. See, they need to have this narrative around the gun because that's the thing they want to get rid of. They purposely keep the focus on the gun and take it off human violence, because here's the thing: if we held them to account and they had to focus on what causes human violence, we'd have to talk about poverty and gang violence and welfare, fatherless homes, pharmaceuticals, open borders, sanctuary cities, gun-free zones, those places where killers choose 70% of the time to do their dirty work because they know their victims are unarmed and helpless. They know there's no opposition. We'd have to focus on all these failed Democrat policies. They don't want to talk about human violence, so they make sure to keep the focus on the gun, because if they can make the gun the bad guy and they can make the NRA member or the Gun Owners of America or the Second Amendment Foundation member, if they can make those guys the bad guys, they have a much better chance of implementing more gun restrictions. So keep the focus off human violence.
Let me ask you, I understand how the gun ban lobby would do that. That plays into what they want. Why does the general media do that?
I think it's simply because the media is in the pocket of the Democrats. They're on the left and they're supporting the agenda. And a big part of their agenda is gun control, which isn't really gun control after all. We all know that. It's human control. It's people control. And it's power. And so that's all part of it. And I'm really surprised that the media is so in the pocket of the Democrats right now. It's really kind of amazing, actually.
I'm glad you used the word power. That's interesting because we don't use that word enough. Because the thirst for, the hunger for, the desperate search for power, I don't think we've ever seen it quite as much on display as that naked aggression, lusting for power, as we saw during the Kavanaugh hearings, and watching what they were willing to do to destroy a good man and evidently a good woman in the process. Professor Ford, they were willing to destroy her as well, to use her as long as it advanced their quest for power.
Yeah. When you look at power on a large scale, the one thing that keeps the power in the hands of the people is our Second Amendment. That's why it was written. So if they can destroy that, they've got, they're on their way, and that's why they try so hard with the Second Amendment. So it is definitely power. I mean, how could you look at what's going on right now and not recognize that it's not power? It obviously is power for the Democrats, and it's a good thing that they don't have power. Don't have any.
Tell people what's in your book, Good Gun, Bad Guy. What's the book about? What are the books about now?
Well, Good Gun, Bad Guy, the first book, Behind the Lies of the Anti-Gun Radical, talks about the mindset of the anti-gunners, and I expose the strategies and tactics, and so people can understand when it's being used, because a lot of times we don't recognize when these strategies are being used against us, against our family members, against the good people around us, convincing everyone to be scared of guns and hateful toward gun owners. So I expose all that stuff, the stuff that we don't normally see, but influences the way we think about guns. Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, Destroying the Anti-Gun Narrative, talks more about the media's, the stuff we're talking about today, more about the media's involvement and how they implement this narrative and how they create this landscape and how they make everyone play on their anti-gun ball field. And so their strategies are amazing, and it's really interesting once you dig down in and you understand what they're doing. Now you can go on and you can watch CNN, you can watch MSNBC, and you can see the strategies unfolding right in front of your eyes. But most often, we don't recognize it.
Yeah, it's subtle. It goes by quickly. But when you start recognizing, you're going, you end up watching and you're going, I see what they're doing here. And you can actually use the book as a tool when you want to talk with, whether it's your local media or anybody else. You say, look, this is what they're doing. And as you said, reject the question and reframe it in the way you want, where they want to talk about gun violence. You say, well, why don't we talk about all the lives saved with guns and just reframe it, reject it, and make them debate your terms? Dan, I've got to run. How do people get a hold of your book?
You can go to goodgunbadguy.net or goodgunbadguy.com or search Good Gun Bad Guy on Amazon.
Very good. Dan Wos, thank you so much. I appreciate everything you do.
Thanks so
All right,
much,
you take
Tom.
care. 866-TALK-GUN. Get you in here, or just call me at Tom Talk Gun.
If you want more interviews by me, click one of the videos on the right. And if you haven't read Good Gun Bad Guy or Good Gun Bad Guy 2, I'm offering a limited time autographed copy. So click the link below. And remember, your Second Amendment, it's not a privilege, it's your right.